So, hi, Joshua Sal. Must be getting to know us by now. um, so, we thought we'd have a little chat about the moon. I will quote Gurdjieff. Gurdjieff is my favorite teacher because I was raised on his books, and he was my hero when I was a young lad. But one of the things that he said was, we're food for the moon. And I never actually understood that. It's only since I was communicating with Charley that I actually got a hang on what it actually means. I mean, you've got your own experiences of the moon, yeah? In the sense of the effects that the moon has on your life or other people, or what you've heard out there.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the full moon, that can be a period of complete, in the past, dark nights of the soul, complete, what am I doing in my life? My life's terrible. It can really devastate me and make me question everything. I've got to be so gentle with myself around that period. It's with that awareness that I've understood this more. I think a couple of years ago, I just made a declaration that, all of these things that keep coming to me, I need this gently in my life. Any lessons, any messages, just a little bit more gentler for me. And then since then, I've noticed that that seems to happen a lot less, though it's always going on around me. And, as you're always saying, the things that are going on with other people, that's the reflection of our psyche as well. So I'm conscious of what's going on around me. And I know some people who are kind of like, I don't make business decisions on the Mercury retrograde, those kind of things. It doesn't affect my life, but having an awareness of that period really helps me to get through it. And I find through that awareness that when I'm observing crazy reactions in people, that it just tend to be around about a full moon and a new moon. And then we think about how the moon affects water, and the tides, and we've got water in us too. And it's like there is a relationship there. The police lay on extra police, don't they? That's the most well-known thing about the full moon. It's a case of kind of like putting on the safety belt and going for the ride when it's approaching.
So, would it be fair to say that most people have a sort of belief, sense that we're affected by the moon?
I don't think so, because I mentioned it to some colleagues and they just laugh and retort, and it's like no. But I mean, that's the thing. People aren't analysing it, are they? If they were to actually sit and look at that lunar calendar and what's going on for them, is there something there? Or then I'm like, well, is it the fact that now I'm observing this, I'm creating this? I believe though that these external factors do kind of play with our emotions and our experience, that we're not quite as calibrated as we could be.
Well, we do exist in a mechanistic universe whereby everything affects everything else. I think science, accepts that now.
Yeah.
Nothing exists in isolation. I mean, we know that the planets affect each other by gravity, for example. There are other effects which we're only just beginning to get a gist of, like Birkeland currents, for example.
The electrical universe.
Universe. So it is coming our way, but it's still a very mechanistic acceptance of the effect on each other. What isn't recognized so much is the way that our psyche is affected. And if you were to ask nurses, for example, they would say that in the med wards, like in the emergency wards, that there's always a lot more activity coming up to the full moon. I've heard from others say that the police force lays more manpower that time of the month. I don't know if that is true or not. But from many angles, I do get the impression that there is a recognition with certain parts of humanity, of people within humanity, who say, but they don't question it very deeply. They just accept that something does happen. If I just mention astrology there, staying purely mechanistic, then we are affected by all the planets as well. Now, the interesting thing about the planets is that our internal organs apparently have a reaction or confluence with different planets, that different organs are affected by different planets. Chicken and egg, vice versa. So, for example, Mercury affects the kidneys, the adrenals. Venus has correlation with the lungs. Mars has a correlation with the heart. Saturn has a correlation with the spleen. And Jupiter has a correlation with the liver. And there are qualities within each of those which are related to the organs as well. True or not, I don't know. But there's also an emotional relationship. And when it comes to astrology, there are qualities of our psyche which are reflected by all these planets. And I studied, I didn't actually study, but I played with astrology for about 30 years. And the reason why I did that was because I was interested in me. Why else would a person do anything? And so I wanted to know about myself. And what I found about astrology was it was very tantalizing, because in broad strokes, it really did tell me about me. And, I'm not going to go into astrology as such, but after 30 years of experimenting with it, I felt convinced that we are, if not affected by, we move in synchronicity with the planets and the stars. So sometimes it's difficult to say, well, this planet is affecting me. I think perhaps it's more accurate to say that we are connected to everything in the universe. So all the movements of the universe around us reflect what's happening within us, and vice versa. There's a correlation, there's a congruency. And what astrologers have done is they have catalogued what happens to people and where the planets are, and they said, oh, well, if this happens, this is going to happen to you. And so they make the assumption, some of them do, that the planet somehow affects you and is responsible for what happens with you. I think it's more to do with asynchronicity, that we're all connected intrinsically at every level. But the moon stands in a separate place altogether. I've been observing the moon for over 30 years, and I have noticed in myself that at different I would have different emotional experiences, and there would be a planet that would be aligned at that time with the moon, and that would flavor what was going on within me at the time. So it was always different, but there was always a relationship. I could see that a relationship. And I always felt that truth, that I am affected by the moon, but I didn't quite know how. And it wasn't until Charley came into the picture that he began to tell me outlandish stories, which are a bit ridiculous, perhaps, to, if one is of academic outlook, they sound totally ridiculous. For example, that 3.5 million years ago, there was a planet between Mars and Jupiter. And this planet got totally destroyed because there were beings living on that planet 3.5 million years ago, and there were beings living in Mars at the time. And the fight between those in Mars and those in, I'm not sure whether it was called Phoebus or something, I can look it up, but there was, the destruction was different for both. Both planets got destroyed, but Mars lost its atmosphere and its life. The other one literally got shattered. And when it was shattered, as a result of this war, roughly around half of that mass of that planet, of the solid mass, because that was also a very watery planet, half of that solid mass, about 190,000 years later, became our moon. It got captured by the Earth and it became our moon. A lot of the water from that planet is now on the Earth as well. Like asteroids, but watery asteroids, they fell on the Earth. And so a lot of the Earth water came from that planet. There were life forms in that planet. And for this, I would ask you to take into account that there is such a thing as soul, that there is soul within all matter. And so there was soul within these low life forms in the sea. And the sudden destruction of those life forms, we ourselves as human beings, when we die, we reincarnate in this planet. Why this planet? Why don't we bugger off somewhere else? Somehow we're bound to the planet until such time as we have experienced certain things, we have reached certain level. And until that moment comes, we will keep reincarnating. Reincarnating doesn't mean that I die and I'm reincarnated tomorrow. It could be 100,000, it could be 1,000, 100 years, 1,000,000 years. Time is a different kettle of fish here. But reincarnate will meanwhile, which is soul. So we reincarnate in this same planet because we're bound. How does soul find its way to this planet? Through the gravitational body, which is the Earth, which is the sun. So if you accept that souls exist, then souls exist in another dimension, but these dimensions and ours are paper thin. But the souls know where to go because there is a pointer, there's a bollard, if you like, that they know where to go to connect. So, sorry, that's very simplistic. But we ourselves as souls integrate with human bodies, and we are bound to this earth till such time as whatever it is we need to do happens. By the same token, these low-level souls that were in this watery world, they are also bound to the moon. The difference between our souls and the souls in this, which are now in the moon, is that we have a progress of ascension, and so above our soul fragments, there is souls which themselves are soul fragments of another soul. And there's a pyramid ascension going upwards. And if I can use such words, we are connected, although it may not seem like it looking at the world, the state of it today, but we are connected to love. Our souls are connected to love. And they're here to experience and create life, to create love. I'll go back to Gurdjieff for a second. There's one phrase he used to use, which was that we are here for the reciprocal maintenance of the universe, which is another way of saying that the universe requires our love to be. Now, I'm going to change it to my words and say that the soul fragment within us is here to experience and generate the energy of love. And this love energy is what maintains the balance of the universe. The soul fragments of the moon do not have a hierarchy above them. They're in a cul-de-sac. And as a result of being in the cul-de-sac, they are disconnected from the flow of love. What they have discovered in these 3.5 million years is a different source of energy, which is fear. And human beings are perfect vehicles for the expression of fear. And these soul fragments, they can connect with a human being. So I'm going to call them the critters, because that's the word I came up with. You could call them anything you like, really. But I call them the critters. So these critters, these soul fragments who are in the moon, or rather who connect with us because their locus, their focus is the moon, they themselves can engage with us via our second chakra, our emotions. And they can feed from fear. And we generate fear 10 to the dozen.
When you say they have a soul fragment, does that mean that they have a body too?
No. They have no body. They have no body, literally. They're on their own.
So are they just a light being then?
They're everything, all soul is soul fragments. Okay? It doesn't matter, it's all relative. So it doesn't matter the level of the soul fragments, they're all soul fragments in relation to the one above them. But ultimately, all the soul fragments are God's soul in creation. So ultimately, we're talking about God. In an ultimate sense, we're talking about God in creation. There is nothing else. It's just God. But within creation, God manifests via souls. And so souls are fragments of God, and we are fragments of soul. So souls are the will, they're God's will, but they're the will that creates and maintains this universe. When I say, the universe, the whole of creation, but specifically the universe. Matter itself is vibration. And we see shapes and we see forms, but it's still vibrational energy. And the glue that brings all those vibrational energies together in a coherent form is the will of God expressed by a soul. Soul fragments are inside every molecule, every atom, every electron. Everything that you could conceive of as being within matter has behind it soul. But soul itself has got from minuscule fragments to integration within itself. So as soul fragments integrate, their will increases. So when you have a planet, you've got an overriding soul, like this planet has got Henry. My left and right brain. So it's got Henry. And Henry itself is composed of dozens of immediate soul fragments. And Charley, the one that I connect with, he himself is a soul fragment of a planetary body, although it's not Henry, it's somewhere else. But underneath that, so you've got this sort of pyramid gradually growing bigger and bigger as you descend. By the time you descend to the whole planet, we're now talking a whole pyramid. And by the time you get to a molecular level, even there is soul fragments. So soul fragment, God's will, is in everything, but it is a process of transformation all the time, till eventually it goes back to God and it keeps flowing. I mean, I'm digressing a bit here, but soul is intrinsic.
Yeah.
And so these critters, they are soul fragments, but they are in a cul-de-sac. They're not ascending. There's nowhere for them to go. They're cut off from the flow of love. Souls depend on love as an energy source. It is created within them, they produce it, it's give and take, but it maintains the universe and it maintains them. But these critters, they are relying on fear as a source of energy. They are cut off from creation in that sense. They're in a cul-de-sac. They have arrested development. And what they've learned is that because we have developed, most animals, they experience fear. But as soon as the event that gives rise to the fear, they go back to normal. They shake it off, they let it go. And they go back to calmness, to peace. I just hesitated there because animals that spend too much time with humans, they become neurotic. They become anxious. My wife works with animals and she is very aware that most of the problems that animals have is actually the humans who have the problem, who are affecting the animals with their fears and their anxieties. So we stand apart from creation in that way that we are hanging on to our fears most of the time. So we're not fearful just when something happens. We've got a brain, we've got a mind full of rules and regulations, which is interfering with the whole process of relaxation, of letting go. And so it has become a tool of emotional suppression, which means that we are at the mercy of fear on an ongoing basis. Because we are suppressing fears and anxieties, and they are very easily tapped by the critters.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens then is that we get triggered, but we don't experience the initial fear. We react to the initial fear. And that reaction triggers the whole fearful event, but not the initial one. And so, for example, if you become very angry, you think, oh, it's anger. But anger is fear. Behind anger, there's fear. All emotions, behind all emotions, there's fear. In the early days of psychotherapy, the counselor, the therapist would engage with the individual and try to relieve the experience, the initial experience. But what would happen is the person would relieve the experience, but not in their body, not emotionally. And they would then re-traumatize. That initial pain would now be worse than before. The mind would get in the way. Remember when, sorry, that was a different podcast. But when we don't fully experience pain in ourselves, we build up a barrier to that pain. And then the next time we experience the fear that will stop us from experiencing the pain, we re-traumatize ourselves. So that initial experience, that initial fear event, that pain remains inside us, except it gets even harder to engage with, because we're now building more and more barriers and more pain, which we're disassociating from.
Yeah.
Fortunately, times are changing, and more therapists are now beginning to understand that to really let go of trauma, we need to experience the trauma in our bodies. Not just by talking about it, we literally need to, or not even by expressing the emotion. Yeah, I'm angry. No, we need to go into the body and experience that inside us. And it may mean doing all of that as well, but it has to be an internal experience. And that is the only way to release emotions which have been suppressed forever. So most people walk around, they carry all this baggage of emotional trauma, and every month, full moon, new moon, they get triggered. They may get triggered the rest of the time for a whole variety of reasons, but full moon they get triggered, and there will come a memory of the past, or someone will behave in a way that reminds them of, and that will trigger the whole event. Except our mind will suppress that before we get a chance to experience what it is. And what we will experience will be the anger, will be the envy, will be the jealousy, whatever the emotion is. We will get triggered, and our fears will get triggered. And that is food for the moon.
Yeah.
That is food for the critters. That overreaction. And so, in my experience, it was always about the week before there would be one or two events that would happen. So I decided to ask Charley in preparation for this, just to be clear. And the exact timing is from a week to the day before the full moon. And for 3 days, I will double check that. I think it's 3 days before. So for the new moon, potential triggering, is it 2 days? So it's 2 days. So this is for the new moon. The triggering could be 2 days before the new moon. Can it be before? No. Can it be after? No. So 2 days before the new moon, including the new moon itself. So that's 3 days altogether. Yeah. So 2 days before the new moon, and then the actual new moon itself. Whereas for the full moon, it stops the day before the full moon. And so coming up to the full moon, the triggering is going to be an emotional reaction of some sort. Sometimes it can be a little bit convoluted. Your experience of it might be that you hurt yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So you might not even be in touch with the emotion. So the emotions happened, but it's been suppressed, it's still been triggered. And then you go and you have some sort of little accident. Happened to me many times. Or a different one, someone else loses the plot. And then they have a go at you in some way or other. And now you get triggered by them. Yeah? So it could come from any number of directions. And sometimes, like I said at the beginning, other planets get involved, but that's another dimension. The fear element is the one that comes from the critters, that reactivity. And sometimes people are not even aware of that. I'll tell you what used to happen to me when I used to do a lot of acupuncture. I used to get a lot of people coming with back pains when it was coming up to the full moon, because the emotion had been suppressed from their consciousness, the mind has, and it gone straight into their body. So then all they knew is my back's tight, my shoulder's tight, or I've got a pain here or a pain there. So it had become a physical thing.
And so what's that particular region about? What does that mean? Why are people experiencing it there in their back?
Well, there's no particular reason. We all learn to suppress emotions when we're young, somehow, one way or another. Well, to suppress an emotion means literally to stop the motion of electricity through the nervous system, through the nerves. So all the nerves, they travel into the spine. Mm-hmm. They flow upwards, they travel from the arms or whatever direction, they all travel inwards. And you could think of it like railway tracks. You know, you've got railway tracks go through villages, other ones go through big towns, and eventually they end up in places like Paddington or St. Pancras, yeah? Big. So you get railway junctions from everywhere and they collect. So those collect in the spine itself. So you can, if you've got a lot of little blockages, gradually it hits the big one.
Comes to the big terminus.
Big terminus, thank you. Comes to the big terminus, and now they're on strike. Nothing's moving. Okay. And that's when you need work on the chakras, because now there's big emotional blocks in those centers. But a big emotional block doesn't mean you stop feeling any fear, or you don't stop experiencing fear. That's still going to go on. It simply means that you've now disassociated from the experience. Mm-hmm. And depending on where it goes, you're going to experience problems somewhere. So I used to experience problems in my lower back, my hips. Problem is that you get problems in the lower back, then you're going to feel it in the spine, because the whole thing links up together as one unit. But there are people who experience it up there rather than at the bottom, so it can go in any direction. Yeah. And it gets complicated because the more structurally misaligned we become, the more emotions get suppressed in the body, the more misalignment we're going to have in our structure. And with that misalignment of structure, you will do certain physical movements. Oh, now I've got tennis elbow. You think, it's tennis elbow. It's go to the doctors, give me something for the tennis elbow. It's like a disassociated thing, something's gone wrong here. No, this is just an expression of something much deeper, because the structural imbalance manifests through the whole body. But if you use a particular joint more often than another, you may then find that that becomes a point where you begin to rub the wrong way, whether it's ligaments, whether it's the bones, whatever, something goes wrong, but that isn't where it begins, that's where it ends.
Sure.
Yeah. So anyway, so coming back to the critters, so that's the full moon in terms of emotions. But the new moon has a different challenge for us, and this is to do in the realm of our belief systems. And during the new moon, we're more likely to get challenged and to have misunderstandings with others because of the way we perceive the world and because the way the other person perceives the world. So that incongruity of vision can then lead to emotions, to fears being experienced in some way or other. So it's a slightly different dynamic, but it still gets you.
Mm-hmm.
Either way, they still feed, but this time they're now feeding from the third chakra. But I'm not quite clear on that one, because I certainly know that they feed off the second chakra. So the critters, new moon, they are also responsible for triggering, they are. And do they trigger through the third chakra? They do. Do they? No, they don't feed. They don't feed from the third chakra. They feed from the second chakra, but they trigger the third chakra, which in turn triggers the second chakra. So the full moon is a direct trigger of the second chakra, and the new moon is an indirect feeding of the second chakra via the third chakra.
Just to explain this for people that might not get what chakras
Go
do.
for it.
What are these? What is the second one controlling in terms of the body, and the third one?
Okay, the second chakra is to do with emotions,
Mm-hmm.
and the third chakra is to do with the mind. That is their essential functions.
Yeah.
It gets a little bit convoluted, but it's the lower. So it's the lower mind. This is all to do with the lower mind, which is to do with the ego.
Yeah.
Once we go above the third chakra, we go beyond the ego. So that's when the fourth is to do with the heart. So you've now got connection with your heart. Then the fifth one is connection with your power of expression, to speak, which is to create. In the beginning was the word, they say, right? The power of creation is to do with our ability to manifest something by, I say this is a chair. Well, what makes that a chair? I have now created a chair with the word, but that is a manifestation of. So we name things. To create them, we name things, yeah? And so this is a part of creation, being able to name something. This is why we need to be so careful how we speak and how we think, because the way that we use words dictates the programming in our minds. It creates our perception, how we see the world, how we experience the world. So we need to be very careful of our words. And I go to great lengths to share this. That, like, for example, most people say, you're the best thing in the world, right? What's that mean? You're the best thing in the world. Well, it's true if they're referring to you as a physical body.
It's all relative, isn't it?
Yes. But you're more than a physical body. So it's a sort of this association of what you are. You're the best, I love you to bits. I could eat you. Yeah, okay, that means like I want to possess you. Yeah, it means I want to absorb you into me. We use words in a very convoluted way, which actually they're very explicit because they really do define how we experience ourselves in the world. We go and see our children or our grandchildren or our nieces or whatever, and we say, "Come and give mommy or auntie or uncle a kiss. Come and give me. Yeah, we say to the children who are full of heart, "Come and give me." love me. We don't say to them, let me give you a kiss, let me give you a cuddle.
Conversely, though, children are draining, aren't they? You know, we're all extracting.
No, they're draining afterwards. They're draining after we've drained them.
Yeah.
When love itself is a fountain, you cannot drain the fountain. But children, they need to belong to the group. You know, it's built into our DNA. We need to belong to the group. So they need to feel secure in the center of that group. When we make demands of the children, when we take from the children to give to us, and when we attach conditions to that love, when we attach conditions to the focus we give them, they now realize that they're not safe in the group. They're only safe when they abide by the conditions of the group. So now we create anxiety in those children because those children need to feel safe in the center of the group. So what do? Look at me, mommy, look at me. I'm over here, mommy. See me, I'm playing. What am I doing? I'm literally telling that adult, I am not safe. I want to be in the center of my herd.
Yeah.
Yeah? So those little children start to become conniving and duplicitous and all manner of things. But only because they feel unsafe.
Mm-hmm.
They want to be center of the group. That's what they're supposed to be. I've seen elephants. It's a wonderful thing to see elephants. If you see elephants with their babies, the whole group surrounds the baby whenever there's any threat. Yeah? That baby feels quite secure because he knows that the group is there for it.
Yeah.
Yeah? We don't have that.
Mm.
We pay lip service to that and we think we do, but we don't because we're so damaged that when we see that baby with so much love, we want it.
Yeah.
Talk about the light. Give me your light, baby. Love mommy, love daddy, love me, whoever, right? So we always say, give me. We never say, let me give you.
Yeah.
Because we are so needy ourselves. So we struggle to give them what they need. And even when we give them, it has got all manner of conditions.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sad. I'm not putting anybody down for just being, we've all been there. I've been a father. I know what it's like to be in that situation, to make these mistakes. We all make the mistakes, and our children will make the mistakes because we're all doing our best as we go through life, as we're growing up. We're doing our best to help ourselves, to come to terms with who we are, and to love our children. Of course, we love our children. But our ego is so damaged, so twisted that we inevitably do not give them what they really need so that they could actually grow as they're meant to grow. And that's unfortunate. But that's a challenge for all of us. But a spade's a spade, and the truth is the truth. The world is as the world is.
Mm-hmm.
And so words are important. So learning how to use words, like we often use negative words when we want a positive outcome. We say to the child, "Don't jump in the water." What have we just done? We've just said, "Don't," and then we've said, "Jump." So the child jumps in the water. If I don't want a child to jump in the water, I need to change the wording I need to say, come to daddy. Yeah. I need to use words of the action I want the child to do, not of what they don't want it to do. That just creates problems. So we always want to use positive words, and not just with children, but with ourselves.
Totally.
When we speak with ourselves, when we tell ourselves things, we need to use. So often what people say, oh, I can't do this. Well, you never will. If you say, I can't do this, you'll never be able to do this. I learned very early on in my life to say, I can do anything. As long as I have the motivation. And sure enough, I've learned a whole lot of things in my life.
Yeah.
So the way we use words is really important. Words have power.
They're spells.
Absolutely. Spells of the ego.
Mm.
Egocentric spells. Yes. So that's the new moon. Why share this? Why is this important? Because we need to observe. We need to observe ourselves. We need to notice that we are at the mercy. We're at the mercy of the critters. The good news is that we're only at the mercy of the critters until we reach the heart. Once we're in our hearts, the critters do not have the power over us that they do. Because to reach the heart, we have to release a lot of the drama and the emotional baggage that we've been carrying. We don't need to release all of it, but we need to release a fair amount. And as we do that, as we connect with our hearts, so the critters lose their power. They lose their power to affect us so that we become reactive and fearful on an ongoing basis. That's why it's important. So this, in a way, this is linked to the last podcast to do with self-observation, mindfulness. So don't be just mindfulness, be mindful during these times of the month, the full moon and the new moon. Rich themes to explore.
Thanks for explaining that.
Have I explained it?
I think, yeah. Fleshed it out. Yeah.
So where does that leave you, having heard all of that?
I just think more awareness. I mean, it's not new to me, but it's just about having that awareness that when this time is approaching, to be mindful of what's going on and to not be so reactionary and to laugh at these situations. I armed myself with a lot more humour about that period as a way to offset that.
Thank you for that reminder. Laughing at ourselves is one of the most powerful weapons in our armour.
Yeah.
One of the most powerful. Never taking ourselves seriously.
Yeah.
Recognize that we're damaged, recognize that we're weak, recognize that we're fallible, and recognize that we're fucked. And if we can laugh at all of that,
yeah,
we're fine.
Yeah.
Well, we'll finish on your wise words. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.